Welcome to the 9th episode of The Letter. Now we are going to be starting a new chapter today. We just wrapped up Marianne's chapter and it was really creepy. Lots of stuff happened. So you're going to see what's going to happen next. Rebecca's chapter. This is how it begins, or so they say. With a gentle wind drifting through wide-open windows, muffled laughters and footsteps fading behind empty hallways, and the light kiss of the afternoon sun. Soon there will be a call, a crossing of thresholds into the unknown. Maybe we are off to some grand adventure, or diving into another gripping mystery. One can't really tell. For all I know, a hero might even come sweep me off my feet if I'm lucky.
That's not exactly a bad thing when you think about it.
But this is far from one, isn't it? A riveting tale, that is. The mild breeze, the faint murmurs, the warm rays painting every nook and cranny a fiery hue, they are all as real as they can get. As much as I want to write a little tale out of this, I'm far from someone who can. Fleeting fancies, that's what these are, merely passing thoughts to occupy an idle mind while waiting for another busy workday to end. Then again, maybe in another life I am one, who knows? But at present, what I have and what I've chosen to be, well,
I won't last years here if I find teaching rowdy adolescents a tedious job, will I?
admittedly, the whole affair isn't exactly as grand or exciting as I had imagined as a child. If I weren't so stubborn and too passionate about the whole idea, I probably would have quit a long time ago. But it's always the kids that make it worthwhile, isn't it? As if in agreement, as soon as my pen slides into a neat circle against the papers I'm grading, the final bell rings. Like a dam that is open, the students begin piling out into the hallway soon after. For a short minute, I let the noise fill my ears, let my mind wander to a place far removed from all the hubbub. Solitary moments like this have come few and far between lately. Even my own home hasn't been as quiet as I usually prefer, though in hindsight, the entire place hasn't been the same either since Isabel moved in next door. Or Isabella, I think. And if her fussing over a minor cold last week tells anything, I might as well throw any idea of solitude at the nearest balcony as long as she lives nearby. At the memory, my eyes automatically shift over the bottle sitting at the edge of my desk. A chuckle escapes from me as I reach for it.
A little ball of energy and enthusiasm. That big baby.
That's Isabella. Mother hen, she calls me, and then says and does the same thing right after. It's not that I'm unused to being on the receiving end of other people's worries, or I feel any sort of apprehension over her fretting. If I'm to be completely honest, it's actually amusing how someone can be childlike one minute, then act like a responsible adult the next. But there's a dissonance there, both in her actions and words. Although she may not look like it, may not say anything, may not lose her cheer, one way or the other, I know these troubles have weighed down on her lately. Her face says it all, that big numpty. What's a numpty? I don't think I've ever heard that word literally in my life. If she thinks I won't notice, she's got another thing coming for her. That's how she's always been. I do understand that part loud and clear. It's just that I really rather not pass another burden on to her.
Or become one myself.
Aren't I supposed to be the one taking care of them? Though I guess that's simply one of those things people eventually grow away from once you've all started leading different lives. Not completely different, I hope. Somehow, that thought makes me feel uneasy. Thankfully, before stranger ideas can take root in my head, a faint buzzing comes from my bag, cutting through the rest of my thoughts. A small frown forms on my lips when the screen lights up and an unknown number flashes. Oh, I think this is when Hannah calls. For a long second, my thumb hovers over the answer button. Even the voice that responds once I do accept the call is wholly unfamiliar.
Hello?
Oh, goodness. Finally, it connects.
Who is that?
Hello? Is this Miss Gales? Rebecca Gales?
Yes, speaking. Who is this?
Oh, sorry. Rose Cooper.
Oh, okay.
Realty Corporation.
Briar Realty?
My frown deepens as I straighten from my chair. Something in her tone, despite sounding remarkably friendly and light, doesn't sit quite well with me. The rigid pause that follows doesn't help ease the tension that has suddenly descended either.
Miss Cooper?
Yes. Things are a bit busy on my end. I apologize. I'm not certain if Isabella has mentioned anything before, but we're working together on a property at the moment, and
The Armengard Mansion, yes. She said something about that earlier. Is there a problem?
this is about Isabella, actually.
She wastes no time relaying everything. The details she provided are admittedly a bit vague, but enough for me to get a gist of what happened. It isn't the bad sort I'm expecting, though still worrying. especially with words panic attack and pale looking a bit sickly woven together in one foreboding sentence. But as quickly as it surfaces, I stomp down on the urge to demand answers right there and then. She's such a mom friend. Now isn't the proper time for useless questions. I'll find out soon enough regardless. To Miss Cooper's credit, she neither hesitates nor falters all throughout. There's some sort of comfort in knowing Isabella has someone like her to guide her, though not as much as I would have liked. After all, this is Isabella we're talking about. What are the chances she just said a bunch of excuses so she won't get sent home? High. Very high. Oh, she is so going to hear it this time.
You were listed as one of her emergency contacts, so I thought it'd be best you know about this.
How is she? Is she doing okay?
I had her take a break for now, but honestly, I'd feel better if someone were to pick her up and take her home for some rest. Anthem's a fair distance from Luxbourne. I really don't want her going off on her own. I'd do it myself, but well, you know how it is today. Big day. People everywhere until the open house ends. I'm really sorry to ask this of you, Miss Gales. I know you're busy.
Oh, no, it's all good. I was just about to leave from work. I hope to leave early today anyway. A few minutes ahead wouldn't hurt. I can be there in a few, 30, 40 minutes tops. Is that all right?
More than fine, Miss Gales, thank you. We're supposed to be here until... Oh, excuse me. One moment, please. Yes, ma'am.
The faint hum of conversation echoes from her end. It sounds as though the place is buzzing with more people than you'll expect from a regular open house. I was skeptical at first. The house is old, not to mention its inconvenient location in Luxbourne's outskirts. Who wants to live in a place almost an hour's drive away from the comforts of a city? But from what little I can hear, it appears Isabella has every right to be optimistic about this sale. If I didn't understand why she was so adamant in refusing my offer of help before, I think I do now. To some degree.
We'll be resuming the tour soon. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. I really need to get this thing going. Lord knows how I'll salvage the situation here. It shouldn't be anything complicated, but still, clients. It can be difficult when they want to be. Anyway, just look for me when you get here, alright? I shouldn't be too hard to miss.
No problem. Thanks for letting me know about this. Just make sure Isabella stays put, please. Heaven knows how stubborn that girl can be.
Oh, believe me, I know. Don't worry about it. I'll have a few of our staff keep an eye on her for me until you get here.
That's all I'm asking. I appreciate it.
The whole thing ends on a surprisingly pleasant note. If only the same could be said for the news she brought. I allow a brief minute to pass to ease whatever tension has lashed itself firmly to my nerves, but no matter how much I wish for it, my mind stubbornly refuses to do so. My hands are unsteady against the papers I pretend to arrange after. Lucid thoughts, every single ounce of it grimmer than the other, grows with each passing second I linger. Something about this whole thing, along with the sudden unease and nagging worry, screams, off. Wrong. This isn't the riveting tale I've hoped to step into today. Even in a rush, getting everything in order before leaving takes nearly a good quarter hour. By the time I make it out of the classroom, the commotion has already died down, dwindling to mere echoes and distant laughters. From the nearby room, melodies from a rehearsing band drift freely into the air, filling the almost empty hallway with their warm, lively tunes. Aw, so nice. Any other day, I'll stop, bask in the music, and enjoy what little peace it brings. Not today, however. My steps are brisk and sure as I march to Edward Hall's exit. The sooner I confirm Isabella is okay, the sooner I can shake off this niggling feeling. For one reason or another, that single call, of all possible things, has thrown everything off kilter. I'd rather this be over with as quickly as possible. So much that I nearly barrel over a student in my haste. Though perhaps it's really the other way around. Aw, she's so cute! When I look down, a set of eyes, bright and hopeful, stare back at me. Her arms are wrapped around my waist like a vice, and at my attention, a grin spreads over her face. She's so precious! She's a little girl from Zachary's chapter, and I love her! Oh, that's so cute.
Hello, Kylie. You know, you aren't supposed to run into people like that.
Okay, I guess she doesn't have a voice for now. She says, "Sorry, Miss Pink." She loosens her hold on me, but not a hint of guilt or regret appears on her. If anything, it seems to remark only amused her. A smile appears on my face before I can help it, matching the one on her own.
Just remember not to do it again, all right? You could get hurt.
You sound like my mama when she's scolding Rowan, Miss Pink.
I'm sure your mama only means well. I know she'll be worried sick if one of you were to get hurt. Where's your brother anyway? Aren't you two supposed to be heading home now?
Rowan said he's got some stuff he needs to do before we go. I think he's taking too long. But he promised
chance you'll tell Miss Pink about it?
That's so cute. She shakes her head, both her hands going to her mouth as if to keep a precious secret from spilling out.
I made a promise.
That's so cute.
Just that it's for Tio Luke.
Oh, something like a gift?
Like a deal. Tio promised to take him somewhere cool when he's old enough. Rowan's gonna prove he's a grown-up.
Okay. Laughter slips free from my lips. The teacher in me wants to give whoever this Tio is a reprimand for bringing about this kind of behavior in children. But if both Suarez kids are so fond of him, there shouldn't be anything to worry about, yes? At any rate, they're nothing but well-behaved, both Kylie and her brother. Rowan, the eldest, may have an occasional odd streak in and out of class, but their parents taught them well. I see no reason to cast any suspicion of bad behavior on them.
As long as it isn't anything dangerous, all right?
It's not. Cross my heart. My drawings are a lot prettier than what he's doing anyway. Tio said so. Do you want to see? I drew one earlier at class.
Is that why you're here?
Not really. I was gonna show it to my friend first. But since it's you, I'm sure she wouldn't mind if you see it before she does.
Oh no. I can't stay right now, Kylie.
Her face falls immediately after the words are out. A small part of me feels responsible for that crestfallen look, but as much as I want to stay a little longer, there's another place I need to be at right now. And frankly, another child to look after. Taking both of her hands, I kneel in front of her and muster the most rueful smile I can give. At her age, I'm quite sure she already understands what I'm about to say before they're even out. But remarkably, she doesn't look away or pout as I'm expecting her to.
I'm sorry. You know what? Rowan has a class with me on Monday around this time. Why don't you drop by again next week? After class? I'll even make sure to wait for you. It's just that I absolutely must leave now. My friend had an accident earlier, and I'm the only one she has here.
It's taking her longer to explain why she can't stay than it would to actually look at the picture, but okay.
What about her mama and papa?
Her family lives really far from here, I'm afraid. Do you remember where Asia is? The southeast part? That's where they are.
Her eyes immediately light up at my question. Just like that, I know I've earned the girl's forgiveness.
Oh, just like Takako.
Who?
My friend. She said she used to live there, only just a little higher than southeast. But she hasn't come home in a long time, so she doesn't remember much about it anymore. Melanie says it's weird I talked to her, but I think she's just shy. They could be good friends too. Don't you think so, Miss Pink?
Maybe if you introduce them properly, they will be.
That's what I think. Takako's just lonely. If she makes more friends, she won't be anymore. Is your friend like that too?
A little, possibly. To be honest, sometimes I can't tell with her.
After all, Isabella has always been the kind to hold a smile, even when things have taken a turn for the worst. 5 years and one will think it's enough time to know a person. When you consider it, come to think of it, all these years I've never, not even once, seen her cry. Not over a trivial matter, even when things are tough.
Okay, you can go to her. I'll just show you my drawing next time.
Thank you. Remind me to buy you a huge glass of parfait, all right?
That's a little weird for a teacher to buy a kid parfait.
Takako said so. A small one is okay.
I'll remember that. Say hi to your friend for me.
I will. I'm sure she'd love to meet you too. See you, Miss Pink.
I'll see you later, Kylie.
London Bridge is falling down, falling
She doesn't
down,
look back or wait for any sort of a goodbye from me. With a song and an extra spring in her step, she bounds across the corridor with as much spirit only a child her age can have. As if the conversation has never taken any downhill turn for her at all. As if there isn't a single thing to worry about in the world. Not long after, she disappears behind a door, leaving behind strains of an old familiar rhyme lingering in the air. Carefree, unbidden. Untroubled moments like this, I envy her. And as I resume my hurried pace, a tiny whisper at the back of my mind wishes the same can be said of myself and my own worries. Luxburg may be a small city, but it's no stranger to hellish rush hour traffic. Not surprisingly, getting out of the city today proves more of a breeze than a hassle. A relief considering how none of my calls to Isabella have made it through. Either the reception's really bad over there, or she's ignoring them on purpose. Both just nothing to ease the disquiet in me. The rest of my drive passes without much incident as soon as I'm out on the busy streets. In less than 30 minutes, the mansion looms ahead of me. For all the fuss Isabella made about the house, it remains a thing of beauty. Unlike Luxburn, the estate and the nearby Anselm village stand as its complete opposite, living and breathing the songs of the old, whispers of a once booming haven lingering in the air. Contemporary conveniences aside, it's a place I'm glad modernization hasn't wholly touched.
It's just a shame the locals know more of the silly hearsay than the history itself. If I
Sadly, complaining is all I can afford to do. As much as I want to give them a piece of my mind, it isn't why I'm here. I don't think these rich types will appreciate getting a lecture from me either. I have as much business with them as they have with me. With a heavy sigh, I give myself one last second to take in the scenery before heading up to the main entrance. Most of the guests are already heading out. Though some still linger, it's mainly just to take photos of the house's facade or its various rooms. I pause for a moment, scanning the small crowd gathered at the foyer, looking for any sign of that familiar ponytail among the sea of hats and heads.
No sign of her.
No sign of the other staff or Miss Cooper, either. I can certainly look for Isabella on my own, but in a place this big, I'd be lucky if I didn't end up lost or find her before we need to meet with Zachary and Ash tonight. Sighing, I reach for my mobile and redial her number, the gesture familiar now after so many attempts earlier. If she doesn't answer, I can still try contacting Miss Cooper. Just hope the network reception will cooperate this time. This side of the county has never been popular with the tech-savvy, after all. Try relief, it only took 3 unsuccessful tries. At the 4th one, right as it's about to switch to another intercept message, the line finally rings. Silence follows while I wait for her to pick up, the ringing going far too long for my tastes. By now, most of the visitors have already cleared out. All I have for company are the faint murmurs and an eerie calmness left in their wake. A sudden hush settles and gives way to noises louder than they're ever meant to be. Doors creaking and slamming shut in some distant part of the mansion, floorboards groaning under the sheer weight of the house's history. In the now empty hall, they all reverberate with special clarity against the walls. Like this, those old stories seem to almost have a ring of truth to them. I don't get to stray far into that ugly line of thought, however. Not a second later, a click sounds from the other end.
Hello? Isabella? Miss Cooper called earlier and... Isabella? Belle? Are you alright?
Without any warning, the call gets cut off. Busy notes blare sharply against the heavy silence. But above the noise cutting through the mute air remains the faint cries of a woman. From beyond the foyer. My hand falls to my side as I cast a wary look around, waiting for someone to come running. Surely I can't be the only one here hearing this. There must still be some staff hanging around checking things out. But no one does. Not even when her sobs turn more frantic and anguished.
Excuse me? Hello? Who's there? Isabella? Isabella? Is that you?
No answer. Growing anxious, I amble over where her cries come from, each step slow and cautious towards a door on the other end of the room. While I'm far from someone who readily gives in to fear or stories lacking factual basis, the vague, restless feeling I have earlier returns to me. And despite myself, my heart begins to race and my breathing quickens.
Belle? Belle, it's me. Miss Cooper called. Is everything okay?
Abruptly, all of it stops. My whole body tenses, mouth dragging in a ragged breath, ears straining for any other sound yet to come from the other side. But nothing follows. Instead, the quiet only lends itself to the heavy tension in the air, as if every small movement will disturb the fragile stillness hanging in the room. I wait for another second. Then, with a caution, I reach for the knob. My fingers barely graze the brass handle when a hand falls on my shoulder.
Excuse me.
Oh god, it's a normal person.
I am so sorry. I didn't mean to startle you.
No, it's
Still reeling, my gaze shifts back to the door, as if any second now the cries will start again or whoever's inside will burst out of the room. But I don't get to dwell on these. The woman's worried voice breaks through the haze in my mind again, oddly soothing in the thick of my unease. Even if the concerned look comes from a total stranger, finally being in the company of someone else is somehow comforting.
Ma'am? Are you okay?
Oh, no, I'm fine. This is probably just some cold.
Well, she's pretty doped up on cough medicine, so...
Do you need to sit down?
No need. I'm actually looking for a friend.
I wave the mobile in front of her like the gesture alone explains everything. Vaguely, I note my tight grip on it and quickly slip it into my pocket before she notices. She doesn't need to know.
Well, I'm not really sure if your friend would still be here. We're actually about to close the open house in a few minutes, ma'am.
No worries. She's not a guest here. She works for Briar Realty. Miss Cooper called me earlier. In fact, I'm also looking for her.
Recognition flashes in her eyes, and her worried expression dissolves into a smile at once. It's all I need to know that I don't have to look elsewhere or venture deeper into the mansion on my own. In some way, I'm not too keen on the latter right now.
Oh, Miss Rebecca Gales, is it?
Yes. Sorry if I'm a bit late.
It's not a problem. I was busy with the open house and a few clients anyway. It's actually a good thing you came when you did. Let's see. Isabella should be here somewhere. I told her to stay put earlier. Girl never listen. Rose? Rosie, may I have a minute? There's just this one little thing before we go.
Miss Cooper's head immediately snaps up at the voice. In a blink, a different kind of smile spreads on her face. Smile, still, friendly even, but the kind given mainly for the sake of pleasing other people rather than making friends.
Yes, ma'am. I'll be there in a few.
It's an impressive thing, to say the least. That level of professionalism. I suppose working years in this kind of business trains you enough to be able to pull that off without batting an eye. It certainly didn't seem to have rubbed off on Isabella, though.
Sorry, could you give me a second? I have to take care of this.
Don't worry about it. I understand. I can wait a few more minutes. Clients, right?
You won't hear anything from me. Priorities, you know. But if you want, you can stay at the parlor in the meantime. I think we have a few refreshments left.
No, thank you. I'm going out with a few friends after this. Isabella's supposed to join us too. But that depends on how she's doing, of course.
Alright, this won't be long, I promise.
She throws me an apologetic look before sauntering over to the small group gathered at the entrance. A couple, or siblings, and another woman, probably their secretary. Either way, they look no different from the other guests. All three of them primly dressed, albeit in a manner significantly simpler than the others. No frills, no extravagance of any form. But their gestures and movements alone speak volumes of their ingrained lifestyle. In their presence, I do what I can to appear inconspicuous on my side of the foyer. Maybe accepting Miss Cooper's offer would have been a much better choice than standing around awkwardly and gaping at them, all while also attempting my best not to listen in on their conversation, although that one proves more difficult with how enthusiastic the blonde woman is. Her voice easily echoes through the walls with only the five of us here. Pretty soon, I find myself being drawn into their talk without meaning to.
Tomorrow? First thing in the morning? First thing in the morning, ma'am.
The mundane talk isn't what catches my attention, however.
Very well. We'll have our lawyers prepare everything as soon as possible. Let's make this whole thing easier for everyone, shall we? Just let me know if there's anything you need from me. You know how to contact me, yes? Got your mobile number saved here already. Good. It's just a matter of time, then.
It's a brief moment, a fleeting shift in my eye.
One day for us, Marianne. As long as you're positive, we won't be having any problems by that time. You can count on my team. You worry too much. Let me handle those things. Do be thrilled, though. I imagine it's not every day you get projects like this,
And the instant I turn my gaze on him, I see it.
Oh, I'm certain means ecstatic, Buttercup.
He slipped a nickname.
Aren't you, Marianne? You know, we could all celebrate this with a few drinks. Why don't we? In fact, there's this really excellent Irish pub I visited a few days ago.
Oh, he is not. Looming, hovering over his shoulders, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. A dark blur. No, a shadow.
I think I'll pass on that, sir. I have more important matters to attend to. Darling, your liver. You already had a glass today, and apparently a few days ago as well. How many times do we have to remind you? Doctor's orders, remember?
But as I try to make sense of it, a heavy feeling descends over my whole body. It happens without warning, forcing me to close my eyes. Sensation creeps to every part of me, crawling under my skin and draining me little by little of any strength. Before I know it, my hand is gripping the nearby door for support. Sudden nausea drowns out their voices and what little sound there is. All except for the whispers and laughter. Judging, mocking, taunting. Muffled, inaudible words bearing down on me like a death sentence. They wrap around my neck and limbs, binds tightening with every syllable, every utterance. And with each draw of breath I take, they drag me down slowly, almost painfully, into a bottomless abyss. On, and on, and on, till the sounds turn into mere distant echoes, until suddenly it shatters.
Well, what are we waiting for? Are we done here?
His voice rips through the fog like a sharp blade, and my eyes snap open. When I look to them again, it's gone.
Just a second, darling. Send my regards to Isabel, please. Poor girl. Please let her know she doesn't have to worry and tell her to get some rest. Anyway, we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Likewise, ma'am.
No shadows or dark clouds, Only amicable smiles and cordial handshakes, the usual pleasantries, as Miss Cooper leads them out of the mansion like a graceful host. See, that's odd because the ghost hasn't, or whatever it is, hasn't really manifested in that way before. It's always been, a very explicit, there is a person here. So that's really interesting. None of the group seems to have noticed it, and even as I force my breathing to calm down, keep my eyes trained on their backs, and wait for something to happen, it doesn't come back. She returns a moment later. Gently, she closes the great doors behind her. There's a smile on her lips and an extra skip in her step when she walks back to me. Whatever she was discussing with the group had put her in a good mood. Even she appears to have not observed anything odd. Was I just seeing things?
Glad that was over. It's been a long day. I thought for sure we're going to... hey, are you sure you're doing okay? You look a bit green.
It's all good. I'm actually still recovering from a cold. Weather's been crazy lately.
That must be it. The weather, the stupid cold, and the friendly warnings I'm too stubborn to listen to. As much as I hate to admit it, Isabella's right. I was and still am a little feverish when she visited me at school this morning. The medicine helped, of course, but only some. Although it's not like I can't function, it did get better after lunch, and I was able to go through my schedule like the usual. Now I'm not so sure. However, I can't keep acting like I've seen some sort of apparition when it's anything but. I simply must have listened too many times to Isabella last week. My fever-muddled mind has started to confuse things. If this doesn't let up, I just need another visit to my doctor, plain and simple. Though I do hope it won't get any worse. We did promise to watch Zachary's film together.
I know what you mean. I've been complaining to Isabel. It doesn't seem to affect her much, though. Must be because she grew up in the tropics. Anyway, shall we? She's probably hanging out with the rest of the catering staff.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised she's there. She's like 10 hungry men when she isn't feeling well. Lead the way.
With a small nod, she gestures for me to follow. I do so without much thought, finally putting everything in the back of my mind. The entire visit took a whole 24 minutes, and my trip to the mansion, as it turns out, is a useless endeavor in itself. Isabella's no longer there, left shortly before I arrived. Or at least that's what the few staff who saw her assumed. None of them knew where she went, but I can take a few guesses. There are only a number of places in Luxburn she frequents, and while she's never been the complex kind, it doesn't really take a genius to figure it out. Still, it's odd she left on her own. She could have at least waited for Miss Cooper. It would have saved her having to pay the cab's fare twice today.
And right after she was told to stay put. I mean, who does that? Oh, sod off. You don't own the road.
In the end, all Miss Cooper could give me were a string of apologies for my trouble and a request to let her know when I find Isabella. The whole affair didn't even last long. Probably spent more time traveling back and forth. Soon enough, I'm weaving my way back to downtown Luxburn, worried sick, and on top of that, maybe a little annoyed. Whether the unexpected turn of events or Isabella herself, I'd rather not think about for now. Not when I'm already running late for Zachary's film. Besides, I'm perfectly sure that's where I'll find her. As one would expect, people are already gathered at the movie house when I get to it. The small avenue where it's located has been closed off early from any passing traffic to make way for the avid moviegoers who are sure to crowd the venue. I have to park almost a street away and walk the remaining distance because of it. Looking for them has taken a while in a crowd this big, but I eventually spot them near the entrance. Thanks to Zachary, mostly. And like I've surmised, Isabella's with them.
I knew it.
Wasting no time, I march over to their little group. Words filled with concern tumble out of my mouth before I can stop myself.
Isabella! Oh, thank goodness. Becca, you're just in time.
An odd expression crosses her face as I hold it with both hands, but I ignore it in favor of getting a good look at her, forcing her to keep still and fix her gaze at me.
Becca, you're squishing my face. How are you? Are you all right? Why wouldn't I be?
There doesn't seem to be any visible injury, nor does she appear to be in pain. Apart from her confused frown at my questions, she looks pretty much like how she would any other day. Even so, you can't really tell those things with her at first glance. Last time she got sick, she never bothered to call anyone, even me, who lives right next door. If I hadn't checked on her then, she probably would have died on her bed with the rest of us none the wiser. It's one thing we laugh about now, but moments like those also teach you something about a person. If anything, it has given me more reason to constantly worry about her. And the moment a familiar name comes up, I know my concerns right now aren't completely baseless.
Rose called me earlier.
Her expression swiftly changes, and gently as she can, Isabella pushes my hands away. Yet even before she says anything, I already have a hunch how this whole thing will play out.
Oh, no. Everything's good. Rose covered for me at work today. That's not what I'm talking about. How's your head?
Then and there, the whole conversation goes down as I've imagined. She dodges my hand. That was funny. She dodges my hand when I reach for the back of her head, intending to check the said injury myself. Even makes a show of hiding behind Zachary just to avoid me. Instantly, what's supposed to be a simple inquiry dissolves into a shameless game of tag. Shouting and chasing, like none of us can be bothered to act like the full-grown adults we're all supposed to be. Including Ashton. I won't put it past Isabella, but Ash, out of everyone? In fact, if that stupid smirk on his face tells me anything, he finds this whole mess amusing. Oh, for the love of...
Isabella, this isn't a laughing matter.
She did look pale when I saw her.
Wow, thanks a lot, Ashton, you traitor. I'll get you back for this. Just you wait.
What? I'm just saying it as it is. If you mentioned this earlier, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
There's a moment's pause. My hand stills midair as my attention shifts to Ashton and the words he leaves hanging between the four of us. He doesn't meet my eye. I don't think he's even aware of what he said. But the meaning in each syllable alone is clear, and they echo. They sting. They burn.
I'm sorry. Saw her?
Yeah, they arrived together. Bella looked fine to me then. I don't know.
Of course. Of course. Why else would Isabella leave on her own after being told to stay put, after the little chat about money this morning? Something close to silence falls while I mull over their words, both what's already been said and what's left unspoken. When I do find my voice, it only reeks with nothing but bitter, unpleasant thoughts. Thoughts I quickly stamp out before they surface. Thoughts I hide the best I can in the deepest parts of my mind, locking it away for no one to see.
Oh, that's good. At least she didn't have to travel alone, right? At least. Good.
Yet try as I might, the green-eyed monster easily rears its ugly head. Like it always does every time his gaze lingers a second longer. Every time he smiles in a manner far too gentle, far too sincere whenever he thinks no one can see. Every time my mind suggests his words mean more than they should. Every small little thing. Despite what he says, despite his tone.
Look, you guys.
For all I know, it may just be the kind of fondness born from friendship. Maybe I'm simply overthinking like he often tells me, or maybe there really is something there. But in his short display of impatience, I know the whole of it is just for show. After all, growing up together with him didn't teach me nothing about him. For whose sake it is this time, though? For him? For Zachary? For her? Or for me? That I can't tell.
If she says she's okay, then there's nothing we can do about it. It's not like we can stop her either. Besides, she's still acting like the same old Isabella to me, if she can still run around like that.
Why are you taking her side?
I'm not. But if she wants to watch Zach's movie with us, I'm not going to stop her.
Ash, that's... You, of all people, should know...
Tell you what, if I notice something amiss with her, I'll take her to the nearest hospital myself. Is that good enough for you?
My mouth opens and snaps shut almost as quickly, forming a thin, hard line instead. I can't respond, not because there's nothing to say. On the contrary, there's plenty. So many things I can use to reason and get him to agree. But because he speaks with much certainty, with much reassurance, it feels like there isn't even a choice. All I can give is a long, deep breath and a reluctant nod in the face of it. Before I can get a grip of myself and my own weakness, the mood immediately shifts and I'm being tackled into a hug.
Thanks, Becca. It's always been you with him, isn't it? Did you say something? Me? Nothing. Don't mind me.
A lie, obviously. What else can it be? Each and every smile, a tiny effort to keep things as they are, or so I tell myself. Little do I know, this is merely a preamble. It starts out quietly, without fanfare, amidst friendly jibes and harmless teasing, with a scrap of paper fluttering harmlessly to the ground. One that looks suspiciously like a cheap Halloween prank, no matter how you look at it. And yet, despite how ludicrous it all is, Isabella stubbornly insists, as if our whole life depends on acknowledging the truth in her story. Does she even realize how absurd she sounds now? Crivens, even my students wouldn't fall for this.
Isabella, aren't you taking this a bit too far?
She doesn't give me time to regret nor think over my choice of words. From there it escalates, grows into an argument too petty even for our standards as adults. Before we know it, one after another, harsh, scathing words are being spoken.
It's not a joke! Will you guys listen to me first? I saw something in the house earlier. It stood right in front of me. If I hadn't gotten away, that thing might have...
Right. And in broad daylight, Isabella.
even someone gullible would find the logic in that screwed up. There's also no way in hell that this supernatural shit is true.
But it's real! What do you think I saw?
Hallucination? A delusion? Didn't you say you fell down some stairs? So maybe Rebecca's right.
It happened after, when I was trying to get away. I almost got stuck in the same room with that thing. We're all in danger. I thought you were my friends. Why don't you believe me?
But someone has to be patient in all this. However much my own has already been frayed earlier, there's no one else. Who else here can deal with someone selfishly acting like a kid? Like every other time, it has to be me.
We are, and you know that. But this thing and that thing has got nothing to do with the other. When Rose called earlier, I thought she's just exaggerating. But based on what I'm seeing right now, maybe it's better if we really postpone this for now. Don't bother.
Just like that, she cuts us off. Slams the door right in our faces while my own temper flares before I can stop it. Although it falters briefly at the hard expression on her when she snatches the blast of paper from Ashen, I hold on to it. Regardless of how upset she appears, soured expression and balled fists, throwing a tantrum is simply unacceptable. For a grown woman at that. Words form at the tip of my tongue, ready. But before I can open my mouth and let all of it out, her feelings and mistakes be damned, Zachary raises a voice of his own.
Guys!
A warning underneath the warm and hopeful beat in his voice. We all stop and look at him, and even my own anger subsides a little at his tone.
Why don't we all calm down first? I'm sure Isabella has her reasons too. No need to be hard on her. And hey, ain't this supposed to be a happy get-together?
To an outsider, it may sound like a desperate request, but Zachary has always been the one to keep a level head over petty squabbles. This time's no different. He knows what to say, and when he lets it fall, the words only ring sharp and true.
We haven't seen each other for months. I'd really love to know what y'all have been up to. I only ever get to talk to Bella over chat. Please.
And as careful as he is with his own tone, it does make me feel ashamed. We're supposed to be here for him, to give what little support we can give, yet here he is trying to keep 3 stubborn people from outright hashing it out in public. Later, we can and will talk about it, of course. There's a proper time and place for it, and at the moment, my anger and whatever reprimands it carries no longer matter. Beside me, Ashton appears to have already caught on. The lines of his shoulders eased to something much more relaxed, his expression back to its usual nonchalance. Isabella, however, she stands perfectly still, her hands clasping the straps of her bag like a lifeline, eyes trained at some point near her shoes. There's no anger in her face, only an undeniable hurt. But she's never been good at hiding what she thinks, always the open book, always the one to wear her heart out in the open. And when she looks up, her answer is also simple.
If we keep arguing here, we're going to miss the first few minutes.
Her lips are curled up in a smile, though lacking both its usual brightness and glee, it's a smile nonetheless. I've seen it countless times. It's the very same one she would show when she knows that she has no other choice, simply when things get tough for her. But despite everything I already know about her, it still catches me off guard. In all honesty, I expected her to run, to balk at the first sign of losing this time. I wouldn't even be surprised. At 26, she is the youngest among the rest of us, less experienced, less accustomed to dealing with trivial quarrels like this. Yet here she is, holding herself and coping with it like how she would with matters concerning her family. Outside of that, to me, she's always been this childish, naive girl, and watching the opposite play out right now. Somehow I find it difficult to wrap my head around it.
All right, that's the Isabella I know.
So I feel like Rebecca's being a little bit of a dick. Like, you've known her for 5 years. Sure, that's a long time, but you don't know everything about her. And, like, she just seems so condescending in, like, everything she says about Isabella. And that's, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of how she's treating her right now.
Oh, good. I thought for sure you were going to cry.
But I envy her.
What was that for?
Stop calling me a crybaby. I'm not one.
Aw, don't cry.
Stop it.
I envy her spirit, her warmth, her cheer, the shine in her eyes when she looks at the world. How everything seems to simply fall back to a pleasant, lively rhythm with her around. How easily and tightly she fits into our lives, even without bonds only long years could forge, like a lost piece of a puzzle despite her jagged edges. How she draws people to her with ease. How Ashton, of all people, can be drawn to her.
Okay, scaredy cat then.
That too. If you repeat that, I swear I'll... Let's just go.
I make no effort keeping the bitterness from my tone. I let it seep, linger stiffly in the air as I avert my gaze from them. From their playful banter, their friendly teasing remarks, and Ashton's tender, affectionate smiles. All before the stabbing aches in my heart change into something too painful to bear. It's all in my head, is what I'd often tell myself. Yet the way my heart rents at just the sight of them hurts. And like a coward, I walk away from all of it, taking with me a small hope the movie will distract me away from these thoughts. Because like this, it's easy to find something to hate in her. Jeez Louise. Hoes before bros, dude. Dusk has already given way tonight when we leave the film fest. Fortunately, it does nothing to improve my mood like I'm hoping. Neither does the muggy air that greets us upon stepping back into the noisy streets. Too busy, too loud, too many people taking what little space the sidewalk offers, forces anyone to bump shoulders with those they barely know, let alone care about. On a normal evening, I probably wouldn't have minded the crowd nor the humid weather. It's not like any of them are bothering anyone. And yet, even with what's admittedly a pleasant company, I can't bring myself to lighten up.
See you guys some other time.
Yeah, see ya.
Not even to return the smiles Ashton and Zachary gives us when we go our separate ways. Perhaps it started with Miss Cooper's call, or earlier than that, maybe even the moment I left bed this morning. Bloody hell, it could have been because of that sodding letter for all I know. I couldn't care less at this point. All I want is to get a warm bath, sleep, and wait for this dreadful day to end. Now, if only Isabella would stop babbling, then maybe this dull throbbing at the side of my head wouldn't turn into a full-blown headache, too.
Zach did a pretty good job with his movie, didn't he? Even though Ash said he ran into some trouble late into filming. But I knew he had it in him. It's not like I didn't believe he couldn't do it. I mean, did you see his face after the credits rolled? All those months he worked on this, and everything's finally...
You weren't even watching.
Only the first minutes. I watched the rest of it, I swear. Besides, Ashton was the one who wouldn't stop asking questions.
Well, why do we still need to talk about this then? I liked it. Ash liked it. You liked it. Shouldn't you be telling that to Zachary in person? I'm sure he'll appreciate it better than I ever will.
I know that, but maybe there's something you want to say? Zach had you check the scripts before he went through everything, didn't he? You also worked on it, even if it was only for a short time. Maybe you want to...
I don't bother waiting for the rest. The moment I spot my car, I immediately make a quick beeline for it. Knowing her, this is merely another attempt at starting a conversation, just so we'll have something to fill the dead air, to replace the strained atmosphere we've somehow walked into. One thing, the very thing I'm not too keen to deal with at present. Behind me, Isabella also changes her pace to match mine, her soft strides growing brisk and uneven in order to catch up. A small part of me half expects she'll suddenly trip. She's not the clumsy sort, but there are definitely times when she could be the least coordinated person on the planet.
Hey! Oh no! Wait for me!
People wonder why I worry. They're not really completely unfounded once you've already grown familiar with their habits, though right now this is also at the very end of the list of things I want to talk about. Sometimes it does become overbearing. Even her voice as she calls after me sounds nothing more than background noise to my ears now.
Rebecca, slow down, will you? Your car's not going to leave without us.
The sooner we get on the road, the earlier we can get home. It's Friday, in case you didn't notice.
I know what day it is, but the traffic's not going to magically disappear, even if we go there right now.
I don't want to hear that from you. Didn't you used to complain how horrendous the traffic is back home for you?
Yeah? But that doesn't have anything to do with this, Becca.
Okay. What do you want to do then? Wait it out? Walk? I just want to go home, Isabella. If you want to stay out here longer, I won't stop you. But leave me out of it. I'm not up for any other foolish excursions tonight.
I wasn't thinking about an excursion. I want to go home too. It's already late. It's just that you've been in this prickly mood since earlier. Are you really okay? Was it the cold? Or did something happen at school? Do you want to talk about it?
A long pause follows, and it holds everything she's been meaning to ask from the very start. I'm in no mood, but at the same time, my hand stops short of unlocking my car, and my grip on the handle tightens. I can feel her eyes boring on me, waiting, hoping patiently for any answers I'd give. She's the same as Zachary. They're bad liars. But when you talk to people like them, if you're not careful, they often leave you with no other choice but to admit the truth. These exact same ones I can't voice. Despite my lack of response, she pushes on, surprisingly. This time her tone is quieter, more tentative than usual.
Was it because of the letter?
It's a well-meaning question, much like the rest of this talk. Yet something in how she says it irks me.
If it is, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I did see something in the mansion, though. I wasn't lying about that.
Wherever she wants to take this, I no longer want to hear a word of it. Not at this minute. Preferably never. Especially when there are already a million other things buzzing and prodding inside my head. Sometimes my patience can only be tried for so long. I'm not in the mood to talk, or this cold cut up with me. Say, I'm not in the mood to talk.
Entering the open house, even if there were a lot of people around, there were weird things happening. I don't know if there was anyone else who noticed, but I heard things. I'm sure it wasn't because I fell down the stairs. Even before that, in the attic,
Will you give the sorting letter a rest already?
The effect is immediate. Abruptly, Isabella clamps her mouth shut. Hurt flickers across her face as she looks away, and her shoulders droop, all before the thought of holding back my tone or how she'll take every word crosses my mind. When the realization does hit her, a twinge of guilt washes over me at once. But with all that has already been said and done, what am I supposed to tell her, then? That I'm someone who can be so easily unsettled by my own assumptions? That the stupid sulk has been brought upon by some equally stupid jealousy? That the simple glimpse of her and my childhood friend together infuriates a part of me? Or that I wish I'd been in her place during those times instead? True or not, I owe her neither of those, and if anything, she's the last person I want to know about it.
Look here, I'm not in the mood for this kind of talk tonight. My head is aching and I'm tired. I don't want to hear about the dumb letter, or the mansion, or whatever it was you saw in the bloody attic. Just get in the car and we're going home.
sorry. I won't mention it again.
If you're so worried about it, why don't you just throw the blasted thing away?
You make it sound so easy.
Because it is. Here, hand it over, and I'll do it for you. Might as well shred it up while we're at it.
I hold a hand out to her, though the gesture is without any expectations. She's nothing if not stubborn, and it isn't surprising when she turns the offer down with a swat of her hand.
Rebecca, just leave it alone, okay? I get it. You don't want anything to do with it.
Good. I hope that settles it.
Yeah, just forget I mentioned anything. I'll figure it out myself.
Jesus, Rebecca. That makes me stop again. This time I turn to look at her, searching her face for an explanation. But all she offers me is a sidelong glance and another one of those pained looks, before climbing on the passenger seat and closing the door behind her. Somehow, even with the steady din of traffic around us, the sound of that feels heavier, weighted with everything we refuse to utter tonight. This is what I want, isn't it? It certainly doesn't feel like it. Thankfully, if there's anything left to be spoken between us after, we won't have to discuss it on the way home. Or rather, we can't. Because no sooner than we hit the road, Isabella dozes off. Despite my foul mood, I still end up suppressing laughter once the first sounds of her breathing fill the car.
Not your mom, Isabella.
Slow and steady, the quiet rhythm so completely unlike her, so far removed from every impression anyone has of her. A few faint whimpers will occasionally come from her, but otherwise it's just us, this silence, and it's so utterly unexpected. Still a welcome break, of course. Peace and quiet is one thing you'll rarely get with her around. Yet it's nowhere near comforting. It merely lends the air this strange clarity, every little sound, every single movement more palpable. And with it comes the unease. A jolt of surprise hits me. It's almost comical if this was a different situation. In my haste, I accidentally dislodge my mobile from its seat on the dashboard when I swipe on the screen. Soon I'm scrambling blindly for it with my other hand while keeping a steady eye on the road ahead. That's dangerous. A voice crackles from the loudspeakers before I can put it back. Although muffled heavily by the surface, I recognize the person on the other line from her chipper tone alone.
Hello? Miss Cooper?
Oh, you're still awake. Evening. I hope I didn't disturb you or anything. I know it's a bit late. Sorry about that. I just want to check on you and Isabella. That girl's still not answering her mobile. Were you able to meet up with her?
Yes. She's with me. We're on our way home.
Hello? What was that again? I can't hear you properly.
Sorry. Let me just fix this dumb phone.
My hand stops dead for a moment. I spare the device a brief glance, waiting. Seconds pass. Nothing happens, though. Frankly, I'm not sure what I'm expecting, but the lines of my mouth form into a frown regardless.
Miss Cooper?
Yes, still here.
Did you say something?
Just that I didn't get the last part. What were you saying again?
No, I thought you... Never mind. Must be the signal acting up. Come again?
What?
Is everything all right over there?
certainly. Is something wrong? What wouldn't? Okay, you seem to be busy. If this is a good time, I can just call you back some...
I have to make a conscious effort not to panic right then and there, though my tight hold on the steering wheel tells a different story altogether.
Miss Cooper? Rose? Hey, Rose, are you still there?
Only a burst of static answers me in. Maybe this lapse is entirely because of exhaustion. It has been a long day, and I haven't fully recovered from last week's bout of flu, contrary to what I've been telling people. Though perhaps, had I paid closer attention to it, had I not been so occupied with other thoughts, I probably would have noticed earlier that it never came from my phone, but from somewhere right behind me. Time slows to a crawl. Looking up is a mistake. The first thing I see is its face, a ghastly shade, every inch battered, bruised, and bloodied. Even in the darkness and the world passing by in a blur of lights outside, I can still make out the wounds. Blood still oozes from it, little trails of crimson running down his face, glistening under what little light there is. But it is the gleam in his eyes that catches mine. The quiet plea, the anguish, and the desperation in them, more than its hideous features and the awful stench of gore now soaking the air. Try as I might, I can't bring myself to look away, even as his lips contort into a horrific smile. Even as a sharp, harsh noise pierces the air and the silence around us.
Rebecca! Car! Eyes on the road!
Against everything I've been taught, and I've constantly reminded myself, I close my eyes. It's a brief moment, a short, vivid second of muscle memory and instinct completely taking over. If I didn't allow it, if my hands didn't move or my feet didn't hit the brakes in that exact second, I might have... Isabella and I might have... No, I shake the notion away before I lose myself in it. Right now, it's an ugly line of thought I refuse to venture into. Now when breathing is a struggle and every ounce of strength has been totally drained from my body. Most definitely not while Isabella's panicked voice beside me still rings in my ears. We're alive. We're safe. That's all that matters. But it's not her face that I look for when I finally open my eyes. All gone. I expected stains, little telling marks and creases on the covers to show me where it sat not long ago. But whatever it is, left not a single trace. And though courage is a hard thing to gather at this point, I take what little of it remains in me and turn towards the back seat. Even then, there's none. Or was there really something in there in the first place? With how empty it is, I'm beginning to doubt it. The stupid flu again.
I need a long rest after this.
My hands fall uselessly to my sides, numb from how taut my grip on the wheel has gone, yet still trembling from the unexpected rush of adrenaline. Against my ears, my heart still pounds in erratic rhythm, and my breathing hasn't slowed down. But the world has already righted itself without waiting for me, and little by little, second after second, as I sit here motionless, color begins to seep back around me. Along with it are the sounds and a voice, no longer the indistinct ringing it was earlier.
Becca, are you okay? Answer me, will you? Scaring me. You know what? I think we should just call a taxi since... Can you keep it down?
Strained, harsh, and completely unintentional. With heat prickling at the back of my eyes and the mild throbbing at my temple, I can honestly do with a little silence for now.
Keep it down? We almost crashed, Becca. I know what happened. It was a lapse. I'm sorry. A lapse? You call that a lapse? Becca, I really don't want to end up a mangled mess on the side of the road. Or a mangled mess anywhere. All I'm asking, if the time ever comes, which I hope isn't right now, is a peaceful death. Give that one to me at least. Not that I'm asking for it, but please. Isabella. Belle, you're overreacting. If you're so worried, why don't you drive? Don't have a license. I keep telling you to get one, didn't I? For the past 5 years. Do you see why now? I wasn't really expecting to stay here this long. I thought it'd just be for a year or two.
All of a sudden, a pensive mood comes over her. Isabella looks away then, while what's left of my little lecture never crosses the tip of my tongue. I don't allow it to, because in each of those words she lets loose earlier is a small truth. Her stay has always been meant to be something fleeting. Earn some good money, go home. It's what she'd tell herself during her first year here. Now? Half a decade later, I'm not sure if she still believes that. Even I'm not sure if I still believe it. And if there's something in her reasons that has changed along the way, even if I already have a hunch, it's one thing I'll never bother to ask. Those are hers to keep.
I'll be careful this time, I promise. Just please, can we give this whole thing a rest for now?
She nods, and that is the end of it. We spend the rest of the trip back to Salemwell in silence. All thoughts of an overactive imagination playing tricks on a flu-addled mind and of smiles never meant for my eyes abandoned, if only for a brief moment. October 25th, Tuesday. It begins innocently enough. Tuesday morning arrives like any other day before it, bright and clear. Even though it comes with an extra helping of the unusual October weather, I appreciate being able to catch a glimpse of the clear skies lately. After going through a bout of sickness last week, it does something to lift the mood of what would otherwise be a dreary morning. Despite being mostly a creature of habit, I wind up waking earlier than usual because of it. Still no earlier than Isabella, it appears. I've assumed she'll take a day or two off because of what happened to Miss Cooper, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The sound of the morning news drifts from our unit when I walk past on the way to my mailbox. Chances are, around this hour, she's already dressed and ready to go, probably just waiting for the next bus to arrive. I've tried following her example before, but I don't think I'll be repeating that.
Really? How can anyone be up before the sun is up?
It's a habit she got from home, she said, instilled in her by the kind of life she grew up in. Like clockwork, it's always at 4 a.m., either to help with chores or prepare her little siblings for school. Ugh, that's so early. It surprised me the first time. She just didn't look like someone who could. In the end, I've simply passed it off as one of the many things anyone will have to get used to around her. I feel like there's, a habit of Rebecca just underestimating Isabella, and she seems a little bit dickish. Not that I'll ever fully understand. I'm my parents' only child. We aren't well off, but so far I've lived a relatively easy life. I didn't have to think about bills or food for the next day, or paying for any siblings' tuition on top of my own, supporting a sick father's medication. All I have to worry about were my grades, if I'd gain Mom and Dad's approval, or what we'd be having for dinner. When put next to hers, they all pale in comparison. They look less like problems and more like petty issues this way.
Petty issues.
But as unimportant as it all sounds, sometimes its ugly head rears at the most inappropriate moments. Sometimes they come through your mailbox in the form of a fancy-looking letter, pretty ribbons and all. Whoever sent this has spent silly money on the envelope alone. Verging on ridiculous, really. I can already imagine Isabella wrinkling her nose when she sees this. Then she'll complain about unnecessary expenses and rich people problems. I'm almost afraid to touch it myself, so simply brushing a hand against its crisp surface will be enough to put a crease on it, and it'll be a terrible slight to the sender. But as extravagant as I find this, it isn't really the first time I've received one. Most of the time, it's not even for me, so who am I to complain? Either way, no look of surprise crosses my face once I flip the envelope over to see my parents' names written in a neat script.
Nothing new then.
Their years in the academe naturally brought with it various connections, people from other fields, art, science, business, politics, you name it. This one, though, gives off a much more personal vibe. Letters like this usually come from old students, people who have grown fond of my parents, and they, in turn, treat like children of their own. I've only met a few of them. Most have moved on to become successful in their chosen careers, and little letters like this are their way of expressing gratitude. It's one thing Mom and Dad are proud of, rightly so, and I'm happy for them. But there are times I wish they'll remember they have a daughter here, the real one. Not that's of any importance now. It's not like they didn't raise me well and or provided for me. They did. I wouldn't be where I am now if it weren't for their hard work. And like a dutiful child, I do everything I can to give back, even if it's a small thing as letting them know they got another meal waiting for them. The phone rings for a good minute before someone answers. Mum, her voice as warm as I remember.
Becca?
Hi, Mum. How's the conference going?
Well enough. Until your dad sprained his ankle.
Oh, great.
Oh no, is it bad?
I'm alright. In case anyone in this family cares to listen, I'm alright. Very much alive, darling.
And there you have it. He'll be up and walking in a few weeks, don't worry. We're going to have to extend our stay here until it heals, though. Is something the matter?
Nothing big. Just that this mail arrived for you this morning.
A lie. Thankfully, she doesn't notice. Though if I'm going to be honest, such a small part of me yearns for her to do so and ask me about it. But I put down that idea almost as soon as it surfaces. I shouldn't make them fret. They're busy.
What does it say?
Raise your glasses, give cheers to the good times, blah blah.
Becca manners. That isn't how I taught you to read.
Sorry. You are cordially... it's an invitation, Mum, for a housewarming party. From, Hannah?
The name rings a bell, though at the moment I can't recall when or where I've heard it recently. Must be nothing too important if I didn't bother committing it to memory. There are a lot of Hannahs in the world, so who knows?
Hannah.
She also wrote you a note, Mum. It says you used to be her private tutor at the Evans mansion, and that misses you and would love to see you two again.
Makes my heart clench to read another openly say these words to them. Same ones I want to tell them. I want to see you too. It's been years since we've been together as a family, and if there's one thing that hasn't changed from childhood, it's that Mom and Dad are still busy with their respective careers. Out of the country, away on some meeting or symposium, sometimes for months on end. It only grew more frequent with the years until I'm old enough to live on my own. I'd like to think that's how I become independent at such an early age. They've always praised me for that. At times, I wish they didn't.
Evans? Oh, I remember now. Honey, it's Hannah. Hannah Evans. Remember? Bright girl, 2 years older than Becca?
Didn't she get married a few years ago? 7 now, I think. But, they grow up so fast, these kids.
Yeah, she invited us to that too. Fonte de Medici. But we missed that one because you had to present your paper in Singapore.
We did send her a note after. Still a shame we couldn't attend, though. What is it about this time?
She sent another invite for a housewarming party. Becca, when is it?
This Friday, Mum.
Oh, that's too bad. We'd love to be there, but Da's not in a condition to go walking around. I guess we'd have to decline again. I really miss that girl.
I could go in your place.
I let it slip without thinking. Personally, I've never been fond of gatherings, regardless of how simple people make it seem. But if there's one thing I hate hearing, that disappointed note in Mum's voice always ranks first. Whether it's directed at me or some other thing doesn't matter.
Are you sure? Don't you have work this Friday?
The event will be in the evening, Mum. It shouldn't take anything away from my schedule. It's all right. The invites want 2 people. I can bring someone with me so things don't get boring.
I see. Maybe you can also invite Ashton?
Mum, that's a sure no from him. He hates attending parties. But I'll see what I can do. If not, I can always bring Isabella with me. You know her. She won't say no if there's food involved.
Okay, if it's not going to be a big problem for you, I don't see why not. We owe you this one, darling.
No problem, Mum. I'll even say hi to Hannah for you.
Please do. And let her know we'd love to see her once we're back in the city. Leave her a number or something.
I will.
But you know, the two of you would have become really good friends. Don't you remember? You met with her once. If my memory serves me right, you were 12 then?
This, too, I can't recall. It's probably one of those meetings where we only talked a bit before going our ways. If she did leave an impression, I'm pretty sure I would have written about it somewhere, or at least recognized her name. As it is, the only few people I remember clearly from that time in my life are Ashton and Mandy. Who's Mandy? To some extent. Mom must have sensed my confusion because she laughs.
Don't push yourself too hard, darling. Really? It felt like having 2 daughters back then. Sometimes I wish they didn't send her away to boarding school. But, well, you know how often that goes with them. Still, try talking to her while you're there.
Oh, we'll see. I'll let you know what happens after.
I'm looking forward to it, darling. Take care of yourself.
Will do. You too, Mum. Bye. Tell Da to be careful next time.
She chuckles then, a hearty one, tender and always light on my ears. She may be a stern teacher, but this is the part of her I love the most. The sound of it still echoes even as our call comes to an abrupt end, bringing with it a memory from so many years ago, when life and responsibilities that accompany adulthood are things far from our minds. If given the chance, I'd love to go back to those. I don't dwell on it, though, shaking it all away almost as soon as the memory forms a clear picture in my head. I've always wondered how Isabella can easily pretend everything's normal over a phone call, then bounce back to her usual self immediately after. I've seen her do it plenty of times. For me, it just drains whatever energy I have. With a whole day of teaching still ahead of me, I can't afford to look exhausted in front of my students. Even for a wee bit. It's never a good example to set. So with another sigh, I put everything at the back of my mind and tread back to my room. The rest of my day awaits. 15 minutes later, I'm heading back out, dressed for the day, my car keys in hand. Ordinarily, I don't stop for anything. There's never a need to. That's the beauty of this apartment complex. It's quiet, and everyone keeps to themselves. No useless platitudes in the morning, no need to wear a smile on your face lest other people are nosy enough to ask. Today, however, the morning broadcast still plays from Isabella's room. My brisk pace slows to a stop, and a frown gradually forms on my face.
She hasn't left.
Of course, this isn't unusual. There are times when I've left earlier than she did, like last Friday before their open house. But those days are few and far between. It only happens in the direst circumstances, though the last part of that might be a bit of an exaggeration. However, with what's happened in the last few days, maybe today is one. The death of a friend isn't something anyone can brush off, and for someone like Isabella, Isabella's the kind who gets attached to people easily. With Zachary, Ashton, and I, that has been the case. Can't imagine what she might be going through right now, especially when the woman was someone she owed a lot, despite their training being brief. I'd given her the space last night in deference, but perhaps today might be the proper time to check on her.
Whatever. I've still got time anyway.
With light steps, I move closer to her door, hand already poised to knock. Still, I don't do so until I hear her answer me.
Isabella? Belle? Are you in there?
No answer. After a second, I finally knock. Lightly, so I won't disturb her in case she's sleeping and has merely left the telly running last night. Never mind how she never lets that happen. Ever. Waste of electricity and all.
I just want to check on you before I leave. Is that okay? Are you going to work today, Belle?
Still nothing.
I'm about to leave. If you want, I can drop you off.
Another round of knocking. I fish out a copy of her key from my bag and unlocking the door. She lent it years ago after complaining about the mess and offered my help in cleaning up. Thought the gesture was completely unnecessary back then. After all, I could always knock. But she never did bother taking them from me. Always returning it or turning away from the conversation whenever I insist. At one point, I simply stopped trying to hand it back to her.
Isabella? I'm coming in, all right?
Without waiting for her answer, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Something scary is going to happen. Her unit's still a mess. Instant noodle cups on the table, a pile of clothes on one side, paper strewn about everywhere, and an unkempt bed, among other things. This much is a given. Will always be a given. I've been here several times already, and I still wonder how she can function like a human being with the place in this state. However, that's neither here nor there. Not sure what I'm expecting, but it's certainly not finding an empty flat. Granted, she could have left earlier, far earlier than usual, but she never ever leaves without making sure she's unplugged everything. That's something she doesn't forget to do. It doesn't help that her bathroom appears unused this morning. Another habit, and it can only mean that she hasn't been here since last night? Perhaps even since the morning after Miss Cooper's death. Either idea doesn't sit well with me with the news we've been hearing lately.
The authorities are still trying to find the cause of death for all the victims. Early investigation revealed most of them were employed under Briar Realty Corporation at the time of death.
Wait, there are more victims?
While BRC has refused to comment on this.
Gathering my wits, I immediately place a call to her mobile. It rings for a good minute, the sound of comfort in itself, but when another minute rolls by without her answering, well, I'm not a woman prone to panicking. Sudden bouts of temper, maybe, but never panic, despite how I may sound in speaking. When it ultimately goes straight to her voicemail, a sigh is the only thing I let out. The pause doesn't last long, though. The next moment, my fingers are already moving across the screen in search of two people who might be able to help. It's Ashton numbers I find first and dial. Call it a habit, but even Isabella thinks he's dependable when the situation calls for it, despite how much they give each other grief. That already says a lot about him. There's Zachary, but around this hour, he's probably still sleeping. If he has freelance work, it's very likely he's just gone himself in bed. He's the last person I want to bother, if anything. The wait doesn't take long. Soon a click, then Ashton's voice echoes through the receiver, rough and still heavy with sleep. He never did grow fond of mornings.
Christ, what time is it? What's up?
Not you, apparently.
Good one. Did you call us early just to make that joke? I'm going back to sleep.
No, Ash, hold on. This is important.
Becca, stakeout last night. Make this quick. I've still got a few hours before the chief bothers me.
Sorry, I'll let you go back to sleep after. It's just that... Wait, you were on a stakeout last night?
Did I say that? Shit. Forget I said that. Forget I said anything. Forget we had this conversation.
So, you have no idea?
About what? About what? I also have no idea why we're talking so early in the morning, so there's that.
No, will you stop sleep talking or whatever for a second? Belle didn't come home last night. She's gone.
Who?
Isabella!
Said an answer, a brief pause comes after, followed by something blunt and heavy hitting a hard surface, and a string of rather colorful curses from him. The moment had been one of the many things I'll keep to myself and remember fondly in the next few days if things aren't the way they are. When he picks up again, there's no trace of sleep left in his voice.
Say that again, from the top.
Isabella's gone, Ash. She didn't come home last night. Her flat's empty. She left her telly running. You know she doesn't do that at...
Okay, Becca, stop. Calm down first. You're starting to panic.
I'm not!
You are. Breathe. One person's not going to simply disappear like that. This is Isabella we're talking about. Did you try calling her?
What did you think is the first thing I did? She's not picking up. It went to her voicemail.
How about Zach? Did you check with him?
Not yet. I didn't want to bother him. You know he has trouble sleeping and all that.
All right, I'll go ask Zach. I'll call you back.
No, wait!
He ends the call before I can utter a single word of protest. For the first time since entering this room, tension is gone from my shoulders and my breathing has eased. The bed creaks as I sink down on it with a sigh. The telly still blares the same interesting news, and I'm surrounded by clutter. All the same, it feels strangely calm to be here without worry nagging at me. I'll have to apologize to Zachary later for sending Ashton his way this early, but for now, relying on the latter for this isn't the wrong choice. Never will be. That's something I won't ever doubt in him, much like his promises. True to his words, he calls back only a few minutes later after the last one has ended.
She's with Zach.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. She could have at least sent a message last night.
What are you, her mother?
I mean, kind of. It's one thing to hear that from Isabella, but from Ashton?
Don't want to hear anything like that from you.
I'm serious. You've got to stop treating her like she's one of your students, Becca. You don't have to keep tabs on her every time. Last I checked, she's only 3 years younger than the two of us. That's almost a decade gap from those kids you're teaching, you know?
Says the person who keeps calling her Scaredy Cat.
That's not related at all. Anyway, I'll go check how she's doing. Don't stress yourself out. You go ahead to work.
Wait, you? Don't you have a precinct to be at? Whatever happened to not treating her like one of my students? Because if anyone's going to ask me, I think you're doing the same thing.
Well, it's a good thing no one asked you.
Zach said it's an emergency. Something happened last night.
Emergency?
He didn't put in those exact same words, but it sounded like it.
Ash, what really happened? Is Isabella fine?
She's alright. She's safe. Zach let her stay the night after she... Look, okay. Z-Man wasn't clear about it, but let me handle this. I'll check on her. I'll bring her home.
It sounds like a lie if I've ever heard one. The sort where he omits things so people won't fret, and I'm not sure whether I should be happy he cares that much to do that. There shouldn't be a need for this between us, is there? We grew up together, didn't we? He knows I'm capable of at least hearing out the truth without it gnawing at me for the rest of the day. He knows me better than that. I know him better than that. Frankly, there's plenty of other things to say about this. But despite and after all the trouble he went through with how things are moving at this moment, only one thought occurs to me. What should I say? I can handle it, or I can handle it. I can handle it. Why does he have to go to such lengths for a person he only met 5 years ago? I wish I could ask him that. I wish I could simply say to his face and finally get a straight answer from him, instead of doing whatever this is we're doing. Instead of beating around the bush. Has the years changed us this much? Has adulthood changed us this much?
You've done enough, Ash. Let me take it from here.
Ashton was quiet for a little while, but I can almost see the frown in him, hear the gears turning in his head.
Don't you have a class to teach today? Tuesdays are your busiest this school year, aren't they?
Yeah, but someone has to check on her. And I don't want to impose on you any further. I've already disturbed your sleep.
You're not imposing. Besides, I'm doing you a favor. I know you, Becca. You hate being late or missing a day of work for a very small thing. Leave this to me.
You said you're waiting for a call from the chief.
I'm dropping by the precinct anyway. There's some trouble I have to fix with those guys. It won't be completely out of the way.
Ashton,
I trail off at loss for words at the end. From the start, it's a losing battle. We may have been together for a long time, known each other far better than other people, but that doesn't mean we often see things eye to eye. Time and again, it's a matter of agreeing to disagree. This is often how the status quo is kept. Whenever it comes to this, I can only accept it begrudgingly.
Okay, whatever you want to do.
I'll let you know what happened afterwards, I promise. I'll call you later. You have a good day. Bye.
I admit, the way he puts it isn't comforting enough. He can be blunt like that. So many unknown variables, so many words left unsaid. I wish he'd simply lay them all out in the open, because like this, I'm more inclined to think there's an exaggeration on the other's part. If it's from Zachary or Ashton, I don't know. In the end, all I can do is wait, go about my day, and hope for the best. Before leaving, I spare Isabella's room one last glance, disturbingly quiet now without her in it. I'll get answers from her later. For now, my concerns are best left here. Okay, excellent. Well, that looks like a great place to pause this game for the moment. This episode is a little bit longer than I intended it to be, but it's coming along great so far. I'm enjoying it. Becca's being a bit of a dick, but hopefully she shapes up soon. Or maybe she dies. Who knows? I guess we'll find out pretty soon. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.